Alright, hello everyone. I am back and I'm going to be doing part 2 of my detailed guide to Season 3 items. We're going to be covering Tier 3 items, so items that you build out of items that you build out of items that you can get directly from the shop in this installment, which is going to leave the advanced boots and the Tier 4 items, of which I believe there are 3, for the next installment. So this will be a 3-part video. This is part 2. If you missed part 1, you can check it out in the previous video in my playlist of guides and tutorials, and you should check that out because it's got some useful information in it. So anyways, I'm going to be getting right into this. As always, this information is only current as of the time when I made this slideshow, which is about 4 days ago. None of these items have changed significantly since then, so nothing should be that different. And yeah, so let's get right to it. So the first item on the list is Liandry's Torment, which you can see right ahead of you. So Liandry's Torment will cost you 2,900 gold, which is pretty expensive, so it has to have a pretty good effect. And that builds out of Haunting Guise and an Amplifying Tome and a 980 gold combined cost, which is quite high. And it'll sell for 2,030 gold. What this gives you is 300 health, 50 ability power, so not bad stats, 15 magic penetration, and every time you deal spell damage, it burns for 6% of the target's current HP over 3 seconds, and this burn damage is doubled if the target's movement is impaired. This is an enormous amount of damage, 12% of their current HP if you trigger this with an effect that slows. You can also combo this with a Rylai's Crystal Scepter in order to get the enhanced damage on every single spell that you deal damage with. This is an incredible amount of damage. Liandry's Torment just does enormous amount of damage with a passive. It builds out of wonderful items. Haunting Guise is one of the best laning items for AP characters in the game. It gives you health, AP, and magic pen. Combos with your Sorcerer's Shoes, combos with your magic penetration marks, which you're probably running on most AP champions. So Haunting Guise is a great item, Amplifying Tome is a great item. The only thing holding back Liandry's Torment is the 1,000 gold combined cost, which is not honestly that bad. Like it's sometimes tough to afford, but 1,000 gold for as a combined cost for a high tier mid game item with an incredibly powerful effect that is very hard to duplicate. Percentage damage is obviously awesome in the current metagame when everyone is buying so much HP. This item is great. It's especially powerful on champions with high base damage who can take best advantage of the magic penetration. Elise gets this item a lot. Singed gets this item a lot. Champions with not great AP ratios, so buying ability power doesn't really help them that much, but their base damage is very high, so just dealing true damage because of the magic penetration off of the Haunting Guise and then subsequently the Liandry's Torment means that your damage is very high. Any champion with an AoE ability and champions like Nidalee or Lux who can poke at ranged also benefit significantly from the damage over time. Damage over time is obviously better on poking champions because you don't have to one-shot people. I wouldn't get this on burst casters like, say, Vigar or Annie, who really want to just combo people from full to zero in one shot. This item is not for that. It's more for champions that really like to do sustained poking damage, such as Elise or Lux or Nidalee or Singed is also very good with this item because it works with his poison, and Rylai's also works with his poison, and these two items in combination do a ton of work. So bottom line on this item is the champions who want it really want it. It's often a good first major item purchase. You can just build the Haunting Guise in lane and then upgrade it to a Liandry's Torment very quickly, and it builds out of good items. Very good item. Next up we have the Ohmwrecker, which is only 50 gold cheaper than Liandry's Torment. Build for 2850. Builds out of a Ruby Crystal, a Blasting Wand, a Philosopher's Stone, and an 800 gold combined cost. So about these item components, Ruby Crystal's a decent one. Philosopher's Stone is okay if you're a support who sort of wants the gold per 5 items anyways. Blasting Wand is kind of a bad component. Blasting Wand is not very gold efficient. And it'll sell for 1995, not that you're that you care that much about the sell cost of these items. Gives you some very similar statistics, again, to Liandry's, with 350 health, so slightly more health, 50 ability power, 15 health per 5, 15 mana per 5, and it comes with an active, which prevents an enemy tower, so you just hit the active, and the nearest enemy tower within range can't attack for 2.5 seconds, which is on a 2-minute cooldown. The active is decent, and this is good for champions that like to tower dive. The problem is it builds out of items that not many champions want to get all of. If you're a support, buying a blasting wand is rarely correct. You would rather build up into items with cheaper components that have a more powerful effect. If you're an AP carry, you'd rather get an item that gives you actual damage. And if you're a champion that really likes to tower dive, well, you're probably not an AP carry or support. Champions that could use this effect mainly are, like, I don't know, Singed or Elise also comes to mind, and Liandry's just does a better job on those champions of filling this item's role. I feel like this item is not very gold efficient. It builds out of not great components because Blasting Wand is a pretty weak thing to just have stuck in your inventory. Its combined cost is pretty high, and it really wants to be built by a support because it builds out of a Philosopher's Stone and has a sort of support-y effect, but is just too expensive for supports to buy, so there's just no champions that actually want this item. So the bottom line on this item is it gives good stats, like 350 health and 50 ability power is pretty good stats for the gold. The regen, you know, is okay. It's not like great, but you know, you'll take it. And despite the good stats, the active just doesn't make up for the fact that this item builds out of bad components, and you just don't really want the active on any hero who also wants the stats. So this item just pulls in too many directions at once, and is very hard to actually build as a result. And I suggest avoiding it, because if you have this Philosopher's Stone, you can turn it into a Shirelia's, which is much, much better. And does very similar things, but gives you health, but it also gives you cooldown and a really good active, which also helps in tower dives, but helps in a lot more situations than just tower dives. Next up, another sort of support-y item. We have the Banner of Command, which is pretty cheap. It builds for 2360, which is not bad for a mid-game item. Comes out of a Fiendish Codex, which is a pretty good component, an Emblem of Valor, which is a great component because it gives you a lot of armor for very cheap, and 890 gold on the combined cost, which is very, very high. This will give you 40 ability power, 30 armor, 10% cooldown reduction, and a bunch of complex aura effects that sort of don't really do anything. 10 health per 5 to nearby allies is, yeah, who cares really. Allied minions deal plus 15% damage. Well, it's useful with the active, but other than that, and I guess like if you have, you know, some champions with pets, it works, but it doesn't work with champions with really good pets. Like it doesn't work with Shaco's clone. It does work with Tibbers, is probably the best pet that it works with, or Zyra plants, I believe it does not work with, which is kind of a problem, because the ones that you really want it with are like Shaco boxes and clones, neither of which it works with, because Shaco boxes are classed as as traps, not as minions, so they don't benefit from the aura. But the active is what you're really looking for, and it turns an allied siege minion, so you just click it, and a nearby siege minion, a cannon minion within range, turns into a promote minion, which is a sort of blood-boiled super cannon minion, which is very similar in statistics, slightly weaker than a super minion, slightly weaker than the minion that you get for dropping an inhibitor. But attacks faster, moves quicker, and you get all the gold for everything it kills, which is kind of nice. It's a nice little bonus. This item is useful for supports that really want to push. So, I don't know, Soraka maybe is a support that sort of likes to lane with pushing champions. Nunu is okay. This item occupies a really weird place in the metagame and in terms of buying, because his build path is pretty good, like Fiendish Codex and Emblem of Valor. It gives okay stats. The stats aren't great, but the active just doesn't do very much, and you pay 890 gold for the active, for the combined cost. That's a lot of gold. And you'd rather just attack the turret with your champion most of the time. And build some armor so that you can tank. If you want to push, you should be getting other like aura items that really do stuff. Like Aegis of the Legion is obviously the best aura item in the game. Zeke's Herald will also help you push significantly and builds out also gives cooldowns, but also gives health, which is way better. The stats are just not very good for a support. Just armor and ability power, like it's decent, but you really want health or something along those lines. So this item is just overshadowed by other options. It could be good, but the amount that you have to pay for the active and the fact that the active doesn't really do very much, unfortunately leaves this item, which is pretty cool. Like I like this item, sort of in the dust. The other problem with this item is you can't combo it with other banners of command. Like they made sure of that because you have to turn a siege minion into the promote minion, which makes it very difficult to buy like several of these and get a big push going, which would be sort of the strategy that you could see using for this. The reason they did this is because back in beta, like before League of Legends went live in full version, there was the summoner spell promote, which could just turn any minion into a super minion, and teams would just run 5 promote and just barrel straight down mid very early in the game. So they sort of hedge their bets against that strategy. I feel like a lot of itemization choices that League of Legends makes are based on bad experiences that they had in the beta that just don't really have any bearing on how the game is now. Like I think promote would be a pretty safe summoner spell to have in the game now, because pushing is not, 5-man pushes are not as in right now, but as it is, this is the item that we get, and it just doesn't fill that role very well. So if you want a pushing item, you should be buying items that really help you push or help keep enemies off turrets, like a couple of the items later in this section. Or items that, really give a better aura effect, like Aegis. So, bottom line, despite the good build path and the cool effect of this item is just not very purchasable. It's overshadowed by other support options. Alright, now we have another winner in the Iceborn Gauntlet, which will run you 3250. That's a Sheen plus a Glacial Shroud plus 640 gold, so a very cheap combined cost for a tier 3 item. This thing will give you 40 ability power, 500 mana, 60 armor, 10% cooldown reduction, and the passive is after using an ability, your next attack deals 125% of your attack damage in an area of effect and leaves a field that slows enemies by 30% for 2 seconds on the ground. The field is it's a little bigger than a champion, so it's like the size of a big Cho'Gath. This item is great because its build path is wonderful. Glacial Shroud is an awesome item, giving armor and cooldown reduction. Sheen is a very efficient item. It's useful on any champion that wants the Iceborn Gauntlet. The combined cost is very, very low, which is always a point in an item's favor. The 500 mana you can usually ignore in terms of looking at how cost efficient this item is, but mana is very cheap, so that's not a big chunk of this item's overall cost. And it's not like the mana hurts to have, right? Like if you have this item on an Ezreal or a Hecarim, both of whom are champions that do run out of mana, you'll be happy to have the extra mana. 60 armor is a lot of armor. That's probably the only armor item you need on an off tank. And this item just does a ton for the gold. The effect of the Iceborn Gauntlet obviously is better on champions that can apply on-hit effects at range, such as Ezreal, who is probably the hero that this item is best on. Gangplank, who this item is also good on, although Eternity Force is probably better on Gangplank. So that's obviously very powerful. Ranged Champions can make good use of this, like Nidalees will buy this because they can heal themselves and then attack, and it's sort of very good for Bruiser Nidalee. And a hero that really likes this item is Hecarim, who can really use this, the cooldown reduction, the armor, like every statistic that this gives him is good except the ability power, but even the ability power helps with his heal. So just obviously the awesome combine path and the awesome build path and the very powerful effect, and a 2-second slow in an AoE on an item is ridiculous, as well as doing bonus damage and, you know, increasing your poke damage. When you get this plus a Statikk Shiv on an Ezreal plus a Bloodthirster, which is like my standard build on Ezreal, your Qs wreck whole teams, because you hit them with this, the Statikk Shiv procs, the Iceborn Gauntlet procs, and you can just poke at range over and over again with your Mystic Shot, and the enemy can never get to you because you can kite them around using the Iceborn Gauntlet slow, and they take just infinite damage from your item passives, which is awesome. This item's can proc, like, I believe it's every 3 seconds, 2 or 3 seconds you can proc this item, so you know, more or less every time Mystic Shot is up, or more or less every time you use Rampage on Hecarim, you can trigger this item over and over again. Makes it very easy to stick to people, makes it very easy to kite them backwards, so this item does everything you need on a lot of bruisers, champions that want to kite backwards, or champions that want to chase. Great item, you should buy it. One of my favorite items in the new season. Next up, we have the Mercurial Scimitar, which is one of the most expensive items in the game at 3,700 gold. That's a ridiculous amount of money. It builds out of a Quicksilver Sash, a BF Sword, so 2 very expensive items, and 600 gold, so the combined cost is really not bad. It gives you 60 attack damage, so very high attack damage, 45 magic resist, also very good, and has an active where you remove all CC effects from your champion, so it's a cleanse, and melee champions who use this gain plus 50% move speed for 1 second. So you get like this little burst of speed to sort of either get to people or get out of whatever you're cleansing. On a 90-second cooldown, which means you'll be able to use this basically once per fight by the time you can purchase this item in the extreme late game. The main issue for this item is that 3,700 gold is insane in terms of cost, and by the time you're buying a defensive item like a Quicksilver Sash, you really want a defensive item that gives defensive stats, because on the champions that get this sort of item, you know, more defensive stats than just the magic resist and the cleanse, like magic resist health, or just health and the ability to peel for yourself, like a Randuin's, or the Rise from the Dead ability of the Guardian Angel. This item pulls in 2 directions because it gives you damage, which doesn't scale with anything else that the item does, right? Just the attack damage, it doesn't give attack speed, it doesn't give lifesteal, it doesn't give any statistics that scale with the 60 attack damage, or critical strike, or anything along those lines. Magic resist, which also doesn't scale with anything the item does, because it doesn't give health, it doesn't give mainly health, but it doesn't give health, it doesn't give armor, it doesn't give any other defensive statistics, doesn't give you something like a GA or a Randuin's effect that also makes you harder to attack. The cleanse ability is good, but in the extreme late game, by the time you can purchase this item, cleansing is often not enough to save you. If you're in range to get stunned, often you're just dead anyways. There are teams against which this item is good, if you need like a second Summoner Cleanse, because probably against those teams you'll be taking Summoner Cleanse. This item is clearly intended to be a very, very late game defensive option for AD carries, but in general, most of the damage from the very, very late game comes from physical damage, not magical damage, so you're better off buying armor than magic resist. Especially because nowadays most of the really hardcore assassins in the game are things like Zed or Vi or Lee Sin, champions that really like to dive on you, are all physical damage. The era of Kassadin has sort of waned. So The problem is with this item is it's just so expensive, and it pulls in two directions. It's rarely right to purchase it. You're probably better off, if you need magic resist, buying a Banshee's Veil or buying a Guardian Angel just to keep yourself up in fights. You could buy the Guardian Angel and then sell it when the passive is down, when the triggered effect is down, to buy a different defensive item. If you already are a 5-item AD carry, or something along the lines of a Master Yi who just really desperately needs the cleanse effect, and can benefit from the move speed, this item might be worthwhile, but generally if you want a damage item, you're better off buying a real damage item, one that's intended to do damage, like a Bloodthirster, which is cheaper and gives you way more damage, as well as lifesteal, which is also a defensive statistic. Or a real defensive item, one that's intended solely for defense. The problem with this item is it's very expensive, and it's split between two different things. It doesn't scale with itself, so it's very difficult to actually buy it. Generally speaking, not a great item. Next up, we have Mikael's Crucible, which I actually had to look up what this item did, because I don't think I've ever seen it in-game. This will run you 2200, so it's pretty cheap. This item's intended for supports as a mid-game item. Builds out of a Chalice of Harmony, a Sapphire Crystal, and 920 gold, which is actually the worst build path of any item in League of Legends. Chalice of Harmony by itself does nothing for a support character. Sapphire Crystal by itself does basically nothing. I mean, the mana is decent, like flat mana is okay, but flat mana doesn't help you fight, right? It's not a combat statistic. 920 gold is an insane cost for the active. That's for the combined cost. That's ridiculous for a support. When is a support ever going to have 920 gold on hand? This item gives you 300 mana, 40 magic resist, 9 mana per 5 seconds, plus 1% mana regen per 1% mana missing, and as an active it will cleanse all CC except for suppression and blinds, for some reason. I don't know why blinds are accepted, because everything else that cleanses blinds, from an ally, and it'll heal them for 150 plus 15% of their missing health. So the active is good, right? The item looks great on paper because the active looks really good. You can save an ally, which is exactly what a support should do. But it builds out of terrible items. None of those items do anything. You're spending like 2,000 gold on mana. And supports are generally not mana-starved characters. They're characters that cast their spells, you know, once per fight. They'll often have a Philosopher's Stone. You're better off buying a single mana potion than spending this much money on Chalice and Sapphire Crystal. The magic resist is decent, but it doesn't give you any health or anything to actually scale with the magic resist, so it won't, you know, keep you alive. You can cast it on yourself technically, assuming you're not stunned. So you can use it to cleanse slows and heal yourself, which is okay, but the times when you'd actually really want to cast it on yourself, you can't actually use it, so like it's not a Quicksilver Sash. So this item is intended for supports, builds out of items supports can never in a million years actually buy, gives pretty bad stats for the money, like the active is the only thing that you're spending any of this money on, because the active and the magic resist are the only combat stats that you get out of this 2200 gold. So this item is terrible. Frankly, this item is unbuyable and you should not get it. They really need to rework this item or figure out a better build path for it, or do something. Maybe make it build out of a Chalice and at least a Ruby Crystal, so it could give you magic resist and health instead of magic resist and mana, and be like marginally useful. The fact that it gives you flat mana regen, percentage mana regen, and flat mana is silly, because when is the support ever going to need that much mana? By the time you can actually afford this item, you won't be in lane anymore, so you won't be spamming spells ever. Yeah, this item just is bad. It needs a rework. They should remove it or fix it. Next up, the Ravenous Hydra, which is a sweet item. It's a cool looking item. It costs you 3,500, so again, one of the most expensive items in the game. building out of a Tiamat, a Vampiric Scepter, and 400 gold. So, as is kind of a theme for the very, very expensive items in League, these tend to build out of expensive components and have cheap combined costs, which is what you want, right? That makes an item a little bit more attractive. This item will give you 75 attack damage, 15 health per 5, 10% lifesteal. Your damage dealt with this item will apply lifesteal, so like any damage that the item does will lifesteal off the 10%, which isn't like a ton of lifesteal, but it's not bad. And your basic attacks will cleave for 20 to 60% of your attack damage based on the distance to your character. Like, the closer they are to your character, the more damage it does. So if they're standing on top of you, it does 60% of your attack damage. And if they're right at the edge of the effect, it does 20%. In a pretty decent effect. Like, if you attack a melee creep, the cleave area of effect. If you attack a melee creep, the cleave will hit all the ranged creeps in a sort of standard wave pattern, just to give you an idea of how big the effect is. So that's pretty good. And it does this in a full circle around you, so it'll hit people behind you as well. And the active deals 60 to 100% of your attack damage in a circle around you, so very similar, with a 10-second cooldown. The cool things about this item is that it scales with itself very well, right? The lifesteal, everything about this item works with itself, unlike a couple of the other items we've talked about. The flat attack damage, of which you get a lot from this item, works very well with the lifesteal, because it gives you more life back, because you get more damage. The damage dealt from this item applying lifesteal works with the lifesteal, obviously. The cleave damage gains benefits from your attack damage, and the active gains benefits from your attack damage, as well as everything giving you AoE. The fact that the active is on a 10-second cooldown is pretty great. It means you'll get it off almost always twice, and usually 3 times in a fight. It means you can use it, you can spam it to clear waves, you can spam it to clear creep camps. So this item, as a pushing item, does exactly what you want it to do. So this item is pretty good for melee assassins. You can only buy this on melee characters, by the way. It's decent for bruisers that require a little bit of extra burst. And it's obviously good for who it's intended for, which is melee characters, attack damage based characters that want to push and want to sustain. The item is very gold efficient, giving you like a lot of statistics, even if you ignore the 15 health regen per 5, which is honestly not important, because the lifesteal, you know, if you attack once with this item, you'll get more health back than you will from like 30 seconds of sitting around waiting for the stupid thing to regen you. The fact that Tiamat builds out of rejuve beads is silly, and it shouldn't do that, but that's a subject for another video. So the item's very gold efficient, but the main thing that holds it back is being very expensive. Unlike Mercurial Scimitar, though, once you actually do build this item, it gives you a lot of stuff, because it doesn't pull in different directions. It's a very synergistic item, and it scales very well with the abilities of the characters that tend to buy it. But generally speaking, I think it's overshadowed by other options. For that 3,500 gold, you're probably better off buying a health item, or something that helps you stick to people, like a Frozen Mallet, like a Blade of the Ruined King, something along those lines, or just a Bloodthirster, because you just get more damage and more lifesteal from it. So all in all, I like this item. I really want to recommend this item. I can't, in good conscience, recommend this item very highly, because most of the champions that it's good on, that it would be good on, there are better options. This item does come with some caveats, though, because a hero, for example, Shen, can use all of the statistics very, very well, and will want to spend all of his time split pushing. So this item is great on Shen. Lee Sin is another character that this item is very good on, because he's a bruiser with a lot of escape mechanisms, so he likes to split push, and the extra burst combo really helps him, and the AoE damage combos well with his native AoE from his E, whatever that's called, cripple, the cripple one, his E, you know what I'm talking about, his flow. to do a pretty fair amount of AoE damage. You can, if you get this on Lee Sin, he does actually a surprising amount of AoE damage. I would never get this as a first item, but this is a good second item after a tanking item for a character that really wants to split push. So, in all, probably don't buy this unless you're Shen and already have a Warmogs or a Randuin's or something, just because it's so expensive. But if you are Shen, it's a good item, and this is never going to be a terrible purchase. Moving along, we get the Shard of True Ice, which is the cheapest mid-game support item in the game, running you only 1700 gold. Building out of a Cage's Lucky Pick and a Mana Manipulator, plus a 535 gold combined cost, so like a reasonable combined cost. But really that combined cost is more like 960 because Mana Manipulator is garbage. It gives you literally nothing for buying it. So basically this item builds out of a Cage's Lucky Pick plus another 900 gold. It'll sell for 1190, which is actually kind of relevant because this item is a very mid-game item. So if you get to the very late game, you're going to want to sell this item. So the fact that it doesn't have a full sell cost because it gives gold per 5 is actually relevant to you. This item will give you, that's supposed to be 5 gold per 5 seconds, not 4 gold per second. That would be pretty great. 4 gold per 10 seconds, not gold per second. So this item gives you 45 ability power, 4 gold per 10 seconds. So you keep the gold per 10 from the lucky pick. It gives you 6 mana per 5 seconds in an aura for you and your allies. But mainly you're buying this for the active, which surrounds an ally with a field that slows enemies by 30% for 4 seconds on a 60-second cooldown. So that's a pretty significant slow. The field is a pretty large AoE. It's like 2/3 the range of a standard auto attack range, more or less, to give you an idea. I mean, it's 300 units, but trying to put things in terms of what people actually play in games rather than the game units, because that makes more sense to people. So the active is great. The problem with this item is that it has a terrible build path because Cage's Pick doesn't give you very much by itself, right? In terms of combat statistics, it's very weak. Mana Manipulator is shit. That item is awful. And 535 combined cost is actually kind of painful for an item this cheap. If this were 535 on a 2500 gold item, I would say that was a great combined cost, but on a 1700 gold item, that's actually a lot of gold that goes into nothing that you get to have in your inventory. 45 ability power is decent, and is good for most supports, but most supports don't scale with just flat AP. They want an item that gives them AP and something, usually. The AP is usually secondary. But the active is great. So this item is not a bad purchase. It's definitely useful situationally. It helps you peel for people. You can put it on a tank and it'll help them stick to the enemy, or you can put it on a carry and it'll keep the enemy off of them. Both are very good uses for the active. If you are a mana-dependent support, like you're really having trouble with mana, your lane partner's really having trouble with mana, and you already have a Cage's Lucky Pick because you got ahead in lane, this item is not a bad purchase. Excuse me. However, I would generally speaking recommend Twin Shadows instead, because the active is very similar and that item is just overall way better for the gold. So this item would be awesome if Twin Shadows didn't exist, but Twin Shadows does exist, so this item is overshadowed. So overall, I like this item. I recommend getting it when you really need some extra peel and can't afford a Randuin's or something along those lines, which obviously is very difficult as a support player. So when you really need extra peel for your carry, or your tanks are having really a lot of trouble sticking to the enemy carry, this item can be good. But in both of those situations, the Twin Shadows does those things and also has a lot of extra utility, so can be better. Next, since we were talking about it, the Twin Shadows for 1900 gold, building also out of a Cage's Lucky Pick, a Null Magic Mantle, and 735 gold, which is a very high combined cost. The Twin Shadows, or as I like to call it, the Ghost Bros, will give you 40 ability power, 40 magic resist, plus 6% movement speed, sort of for free. And the active will send 2 invulnerable ghost minions, chasing the 2 nearest enemy champions. They'll chase for 6 seconds at, I think it's 530 move speed. I'm not 100% certain of that, but faster than champions move, unless they're like a Ramus or they've got home guard boots or something. If they reach an enemy, it's revealed, and the target is revealed and slowed by 40% for 2.5 seconds. The ability is on a 120-second cooldown, which is a pretty long cooldown for an ability like this. This item's pretty cheap overall, going sub 2,000 gold. It gives you magic resist, which is a good statistic for a support. It gives you movement speed, which is an awesome statistic, and also very hard to get, especially on a support character. It gives you ability power, which isn't like awesome, but you know, you'll take it. And also some AP carries get this, and then obviously they want the ability power. I've seen Twisted Fates buy this a lot, and it's very good on them. The ghosts will chase towards the nearest enemy, so even if they don't reach the enemy, it does give you some idea of where they are. And if they do reach the enemy, they're revealed and slowed for 2.5 seconds, and slowed by a pretty significant amount. 40% to big slow is very strong. This can help you get catches. The only thing that holds this item back is the combined cost, which is pretty high. But it builds out of items that you often want. If you're ahead in lane, Cage's Lucky Pick is almost always a good purchase. Null Magic Mantle you'll often just get if the enemy has magic damage. So the long cooldown on the active and the combined cost are the only negatives to this item. This item is fantastic. The Ghost Bros will win you games a crazy amount of the time. It gives you map presence, it gives you catch, it gives you sticking power, it gives you peel, it gives you more damage, it gives you magic resist, it gives you movement speed. This item does everything you could possibly want. The only things it doesn't do that a support wants are health and cooldown reduction. And if you get a Locket or a Shirelia's, along with this item, you have, or an Aegis, then you basically have done everything that you need to do as a support. This item is amazingly strong on support players. It's also very good for mid laners who are against heavy burst lanes and just want that 40 magic resist. 40 magic resist for 1900 gold is actually very cheap. Magic resist is a very expensive statistic. Comparatively speaking, I think you get 56 magic resist from a Banshee's Veil. Don't quote me on that, I'm making up that number. Which is 2,700 gold. But it's something close to that. So you're getting a pretty significant amount of magic resist for the gold, as well as pretty decent ability power for 1900 gold. I mean, 40 ability power is a blasting one, so basically you're paying half of this, half the money for the magic resist, half the money for the ability power, and then getting the movement speed and the incredibly powerful active for free. This is my personal favorite Season 3 item. I buy it on probably more champions than I should, but any champion that wants magic resist and ability power can make really good use of the Ghost Bros, and should buy them. I highly recommend this on basically every support. I highly recommend this on mid lanes that like to roam, and can use the catching power. I highly recommend this anytime you need more map control. Buy Twin Shadows. This is the best item in Season 3. It's my personal favorite. It's incredibly powerful. I think this item is very underrated, and even though people are buying it, they should buy it a lot more. Can't say enough good things about that item. Another item that I'm very fond of is the Statikk Shiv, which is 2,500 gold, building out of a Zeal, an Avarice Blade, and 525 gold. It'll sell for 1750. The Statikk Shiv will give you 40% attack speed, 20% critical strike, and 6% movement speed, as well as a passive, where moving and attacking builds charges. You sort of build charges, basically if you move constantly for about 5 seconds, you'll have a full charge. Or if you attack, I think it's 20 times. I think it builds 5 charges per attack. And once you have 100 charges, it triggers Lightning, which deals 100 magic damage to the 4 nearest targets to your next attack. the damage on these attacks can critically strike. Excuse me, I have like a really bad cough right now. 40% attack speed's a lot for 2,500 gold. 20% critical strike chance is a lot. 6% movement speed is great. The passive is very good, especially on poking champions, but also just on normal AD carries. The item scales wonderfully with itself. Attack speed scales with critical strike. Extra damage scales with attack speed. It charges based on attacks and movement speed, and gives you attack speed and movement speed. The bonus damage can critically strike, and it gives you critical strike chance. Everything about this item is very synergistic. It has a very good build path, Zeal being one of the most efficient items in the game for an AD carry. And is generally just way more gold efficient than the other attack speed options for AD carries. I include the Blade of the Ruined King in this, even despite the recent buffs and then subsequent nerfs. But we'll talk about that in the next video. The combined cost is very cheap. The Avarice Blade is the one weak point to this, because the Avarice Blade by itself doesn't really give you very much. But honestly, what you tend to do is buy the Zeal in one shot and then finish out this item in one shot afterwards. Just because AD carries tend to base with 1,200 gold at a time, more or less. That's the sort of pattern that you fall into. This item gives you amazing statistics for the gold. It's very synergistic. It's just straight up better than Phantom Dancer in every situation except the extreme late game, when Phantom Dancer is slightly better by virtue of being more expensive. But even then, I would probably rather just sell this and get a Trinity Force if you're going to sell this. The passive is great, especially on a champion like Ezreal, who can apply it at range using his Mystic Shot, but on any other champion it's also great. It gives you critical strike chance. The standard build for an AD carry should be Bloodthirster into this. So this is like the best second item on every ranged attack damage carry. Buy this item, it's great. It replaced Phantom Dancer in my builds pretty much as soon as it came out, and I have not gone back and have no intention of doing so, because this item is so good. This item is one of the clear winners from Season 3, just taking the place of an old item and becoming overnight core to an entire class of characters. Item probably needs a slight nerf as a result to make Phantom Dancer a worthwhile purchase again, or Phantom Dancer needs to be moved around or something. But this item's amazing. Buy it. Finally, we have another attack speed item, which is the Zephyr, which will run you 2850, building out of a Stinger, a Longsword, and 1200, so one of the highest combined costs in the game. This item gives you 20 attack damage, 50% attack speed, 10% movement speed, 10% cooldown reduction, and 35% tenacity. So CC reduction. The main problem with this item is that it has a horrible combined path. Longsword is an inefficient item. Stinger is a very inefficient item, giving you basically just attack speed. And 1,200 gold is insane. Like, they can't expect you to pay 1,200 gold for a combined cost. That's ridiculous. It gives you pretty good statistics once you actually have it, but the build path is so bad. And also you're paying for cooldown reduction and tenacity, neither of which are statistics that are very important or valuable to the intended target market for this item, which is ranged AD carries, who generally just don't scale off of cooldown reduction and tend not to want to get stunned anyways, so the tenacity doesn't help very much. If you desperately need tenacity because the enemy team has extremely high power CC, so like Fiddlesticks or Ramus, who can CC you for like years, or Vigar comes to mind, where you need to break his stun before the meteor lands or you die instantly. This item's okay, but again, a real defensive item would probably suit you better. The item does not really scale with itself. Like, the attack damage and the attack speed scale together, and movement speed is always good. But the tenacity and the cooldown reduction do not synergize with the other statistics. It's another one of those offensive-defensive split items. Buy Statikk Shiv instead. It's cheaper, it's better, it gives you way more damage, it gives you a way better effect for the gold. It builds out of real items instead of shitty stingers and longswords. It doesn't have a 1200 gold combined cost. I know I come back to combined cost a lot, but combined cost is a breakpoint on most of these items. If the item's combined cost is too high, it's just unpurchasable, and Zephyr has that problem. This item does get a special mention for Irelia as a champion who can make use of the attack speed very well because she has native on-hit effects that scale very well. Can make use of the movement speed, can make use of the cooldown reduction to get her, it's not Heaton style, is it Heaton style? I forget. It's her passive, her W, the one that does true damage, up faster, off cooldown faster, and the tenacity is good for her because she's a melee character and also has native CC reduction, which scales multiplicatively with this tenacity to make CC basically not affect her. So this item is purchasable on Irelia, but that is the only champion I would even consider it on. And generally on Irelia, I think I would buy Blade of the Ruined King or Trinity Force over this item because they give better statistics for Irelia for the gold, and don't have a 1200 gold combined cost. So yeah, buy Statikk Shiv instead on 80 carries. On Irelia, this item is okay. It's purchasable. On everyone else, this item is trash. So overall, big winners for Tier 3 items from Season 3. Statikk Shiv and Twin Shadows and Iceborn Gauntlet. Big losers are Zephyr, Mikael's Crucible, and the Ohmwrecker. The other items fall somewhere in between. So yeah, I hope that this item review has been helpful. I will do Tier 4 items, including the Blade of the Ruined King, which is pretty controversial right now, and the boot upgrades, the enhanced boots, the Tier 3 boots, in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed my look at Season 3 items. If you did, please feel free to comment, rate, and subscribe to my channel. You can follow me on Twitter at @AtaranGaming. You can come check out my live stream at twitch.tv/Ataran, and should, because we have lots of fun there. Most of the things that I do are not as dry and instructional as this. If you're interested in seeing these items in play, check out my other commentaries. And yeah, cheers folks, thanks for watching, and GG.